Hey guys, welcome back to Next Level Gardening. I'm Brian, and today we're going to be talking about which seeds like to be sown directly into your garden beds and not started indoors. I know starting indoors is fun, it's exciting, you can get things going early, but there are some crops that do not do well when they're transplanted and taken from inside to outside. So in this video, we're going to go over which ones those are and why. And stick around to the end because I'm going to give you some great tips on helping your direct seeded plants thrive. I also want to remind you that we just launched our new planting calculator. It's super easy. All you have to do is go on there, find your last frost date, enter it. It'll tell you exactly when you can sow your seeds indoors and outdoors, customized for your location. So why do some crops hate to be started indoors? It usually comes down to three things. Some plants have delicate tap roots that really don't like being disturbed. Others grow so fast that by the time you transplant them, they've already outgrown their pots. And some just don't handle the transition well. They get stunted or even die. Carrots, radishes, beets, parsnips, they all have fragile tap roots. And if you disturb them by transplanting, they can end up being stunted or even forked. Instead, sow them directly onto loose, well-draining soil. Trust me, they'll be much happier that way. One more tip for root vegetables, make sure to thin them properly. It can be tough to get rid of those extra seedlings, but giving each plant enough space is crucial for growing big, healthy roots. Carrot seeds are very tiny, but they like to be kept moist, but they also need light as soon as they sprout. If you cover them with soil, that will keep them moist. However, it's also going to keep out the light that they need as soon as that seed splits open. One thing you can do is to sow your seeds on top of the ground, water them in well, put a board on top of them, and in about 7 days, start to check under that board daily. If you see little white sprouts, remove the board, give it another good watering, and within a day, those tap roots will be sent down and they no longer are in need of moisture on top of the soil. Another way to do it, if you don't want to check the board every single day, is to cover them with a very thin layer instead of the board. Cover them with a thin layer of either vermiculite or wood shavings and keep them moist. Those will keep the moisture in but allow enough light to penetrate to get the germination going. Corn is a fast grower and it doesn't like having its roots messed with. Plus, it likes to be planted in blocks because corn is wind pollinated. If you plant one single line of corn and the wind blows this way, it's going to blow the pollen from the top of the corn over onto your other crops and not down onto the corn silk where it belongs. If you plant them in blocks of maybe 4 feet by 4 feet, no matter which way the wind blows, it's going to hit the other corn stalks. A few years ago, I did a trial where I had started some corn in the house. By the time I got it outside, it wasn't looking like it was thriving. And so I went ahead and planted it, but next to it, I planted another block of direct sown corn. Within 3 weeks, the direct sown corn, even though it was several weeks behind the indoor grown corn, it had passed the indoor grown corn. And it actually ended up producing earlier and better than the one I started indoors. So it's tough to wait sometimes, but for something like corn, it's worth it. Beans and peas grow quickly and do not transplant well. Their roots grow really fast, and if they're confined to a small pot, they get really restricted and start to stress out. Just plant them directly into the garden when the soil warms up, and you'll have a much stronger and more vigorous crop. One trick I like to use with peas is to soak them in a bowl of water overnight. It's going to help them germinate much faster. With beans, there is a way to start indoors. If you have a short growing season and really your only choice is to start them indoors, the best thing to use are root trainers. Fill them with potting soil. And once the roots get started, these grooves down the side actually train the roots to grow deep. And then because you can unfold it and simply slip the root ball out, there's less transplant shock. Squash, pumpkins, cucumbers, and melons all technically can be sown indoors and brought outside, but they don't love it. The roots are sensitive and they don't like being disturbed. Plus, they grow quickly, so by the time they're ready to go outside, they may already be struggling in their pots. Another tip is if you live in a rainy, wet summer climate, you want to plant them up on mounds. And that really helps with drainage, and an added bonus, it will help warm up the ground earlier in the spring so you can plant them outside direct sown sooner. Remember to give them plenty of space to ramble, or for cucumbers, small squashes, even small pumpkins and melons, you can grow them up a trellis to save space. Lettuce, spinach, arugula, and other leafy greens do best when they're direct sown in the spot they're going to grow in. They grow fast and they don't always transplant well, especially in warmer weather. Plus, succession sowing them means sowing a few in a row this week, a couple weeks later sowing a few more, a couple weeks later sowing a few more. You're going to get a continuous harvest throughout the season. If you live in a hot climate, consider growing them in partial shade. That's going to make them last a lot longer before they actually try to go to seed. If you find it really hard to thin out seedlings, lettuce is one of those difficult ones because the seeds are so small. You can actually take an old spice jar, add a packet of seeds to a tablespoon of sand, shake it up, spread the seeds that way, and the sand will actually help distribute the seeds without you really even trying. Herbs like dill, cilantro, parsley, and fennel all have taproots that make them very susceptible to failing if you're going to transplant them by first growing them indoors and bringing them outdoors. There's really no need for that. They can be sown in really cool weather. In fact, these dill right here, they just came up from last year's self-seeding. Another problem with sowing these kind of herbs in the house and bringing them outdoors is they tend to bolt or try to go to seed very quickly. They don't really put on all the leafy green that you want with herbs. All of these herbs are great companion plants, especially when you let some of them go to flower. They bring in all kinds of beneficial insects to help keep your garden pest-free. For more ideas on science-based companion planting, I'll leave a link below to my book. Now, of course, like with everything else, there are exceptions. Oh, and by the way, don't get jealous of my tomatoes here in February. They're left over from this last year. We've had a really mild winter, but not enough heat to make them taste good. They really just taste maybe one tiny step above store-bought tomatoes, which isn't anything to brag about. I'm just leaving them here because I'm going to collect some seeds later. So, like I was saying, as with all things, there are exceptions. I've already mentioned a few in this video. Another one, though, if you live in a really short growing season, any kind of squash, pumpkins, cucumbers, any of that family there, you can start them indoors by using biodegradable pots. I'll leave a link below to some. With those, you can just stick the whole pot in the ground and they disintegrate. The roots go right through. They really don't even know they've been transplanted. A couple more things. When you're direct sowing outside, the seeds need to stay moist at all times. If they dry out at any time before you see the new leaves coming through the top of the ground, they can fail. If the seed has already split open and the root has gone out, but you don't see any leaves yet, and they go dry, that's pretty much it for them. Also, once seeds are up, you can put a little layer of mulch around them just to hold moisture in and keep them from competing with weeds. So as we've discussed, sowing some seeds indoors is a mistake. If you want a list of some other seed starting mistakes, click on this video right here, and I'll see you guys next time.